I am just going to throw out a PG-13 warning. I won't call it profanity because I don't really want to have a discussion about why I may or may not be engaging in the profane in the middle of a sacred act. But certainly the possibility of language exists. As you can see, I have my wheat in front of me, and it's nice and bendy, so it just kind of wants to give for me. This is from a previous take, which may or may not have been accompanied by language. And you can see that it just sort of split, and all that was holding it together was this piece. So when that happens, just set it to the side and find something else to use it for. I will generally group them together by length because you're always going to get a bit of a variety. So I have like these 4 random sized ones. I have a small collection of these. This seems to be my largest grouping. If you're not leaving your wheat heads on, then you can just line them up by the bottom. And the reason we are having another take is because my wheat heads have been obnoxious. So I'm cutting mine off, which I don't normally do. And I'm not sure how I entirely feel about, but we're gonna do it. Now, I would say normally you wanna give, to make it really easy to work with, about 12 inches is usually good, but I almost always do something different than what I'm told. So I'm gonna just kind of pop past that by maybe 1.5 inches, eyeballing it. And I'm just gonna grab my grouping and slice them all already lined up at the bottom to the same length in the same spot. And now I have a lovely little sprig of wheat, which I actually might do something with later. I don't know. So I'm gonna pop some of these to the side. I might actually be able to find a use for those later and just add a couple of wheat heads. We'll see how that works. But for these purposes, we want to start by finding one that is a fairly good density. And when you take off the seed heads, see how like flippy those are? This part is really prone to mucking things about and moving things around. If you're going to go from the seed head down, you might actually measure about 12 inches from the base of your seed head, or even potentially a little bit less than that if you don't mind a smaller cross, so that you'll just have less material that you're working with. It's going to be less likely to go to pieces on you, quite literally. But even with them shorter, you can have some that are a little bit thinner and more likely to be really easily giving. And while giving is normally something we like and approve of, for the purposes of the middle of our cross, we really want it to be a nice and sturdy piece. And in case you're wondering what this is, that is these bits. And when we soak our wheat, they tend to just kind of want to come off, right? And those pieces we might have used traditionally to tie our crosses together. You're welcome to do that. I would keep them soaking up until you get pretty close to being ready to tie off, and then pull them out and just set them out on your towel to let the really excess water leak out of them a little bit, just because you want them to be nice and pliable. If you're going to be tying them around something, you don't want them to split. But I actually this year am trying to match my lovely wall covering. So I will be using embroidery floss, and I have that here available along with my handy dandy scissors. To begin, you just want to have everything pretty close to hand, and you want to mentally have an idea of north, south, east, and west, or 12, 6, 3, and 9. I kind of like the north, south, east, and west because I often read about evidence that Brighid might be in some ways a dawn goddess or similar to some of the dawn goddesses in other Indo-European cultures. And so as we get further into the project, we're going to be putting our next pieces on from east to west, and that flows quite nicely with that dawn goddess imagery. But to start with, we're just going to have our central spoke, and we are just going to grab one that feels kind of bendy, and we're going to start by just coming here from the center and going, well, and that's exactly what I was talking about with really starting to split. So I'm going to peel some of those excess pieces off, and it looks like in the end, the center part is not actually breaking. So we're going to go ahead and use that piece. And you just want to pull that nice and tight and lay that pointing to the east. And then you want to come over, you want to go from north to south, just nice and taut. And then from east to west. Now, we want to turn. This is the only time we're going to turn it. You can see that mine don't perfectly line up. It's a little bit easier if they do, but if they don't, like it's not the end of the world. And from now on, like the dawn, we are going to go from east to west. So I am just going to stick my next straw on like that. I lied to you. You're always going to turn it. Ignore me. It was not to lie. Simply alternative facts. And again, from east to west, turn. And if you just hold the bottom when you turn it, here just kind of a little bit below, because that's the most recently added piece, that's going to keep it nice and stable. So it's going to be a little bit easier to manipulate and to move if we just keep kind of paying attention to that bottom part. And when we're doing this as a one-person job, that's certainly preferable. And that also will help you sort of get an opportunity to kind of fiddle things about a bit. So, just to show you here closer, we can start to see the very beginnings of that weaving in the middle. I'm going to take my nice bendy piece. This is my north, south, east, and west. And I am just going to come over and fold. Grab this, turn. I'm going to fiddle around and tighten a bit. Come down a little. Take my next piece, lay it on, fold, grab this. So I'm grabbing my southern piece, I'm holding it. This is a little bit looser than I'd like, so I'm just gonna kind of give that a squish and fiddle with it for a little bit. And see how nice and stable that is when I'm holding the south end. And then I'm not going to turn it yet because I haven't added a new piece. Holding that south end, I'm going to grab, I'm going to fold, I'm going to move down, bring it around, tighten it up a bit. East to west, bending across on my south end, turn, tighten. You can just keep adding until it feels like it's where you want it to be. That's going to be different for everyone. The more that you add, the more stable it's going to be. Also, the thicker they are, the more stable it tends to be. Mine are kind of drying out a little bit because I'm on my multiple takes, but that's okay. As long as they're not actively breaking, you should be all right. So just east to west, and see how much easier this gets the further along we get. So east to west, grab, turn. I'm holding on to my south. East to west, turn, holding on to my south. I'm going to just adjust that just a smidge. And you can really see the weaving starting to appear in our pattern. East to west and turn. I actually really love listening to the videos online from Ireland and people talking about their own experiences learning these in school and things like that. It's just really lovely to listen to, and I would definitely recommend doing that if you have the time and the energy, just one day to sit and enjoy somebody spinning a bit of a yarn for you. I have seen all kinds of things about how many you should have on each. I have counted on a lot of those videos, and it seems like a lot of them end up with about 7, which I find to be an interestingly sort of random number. So I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm gonna keep going, and I may just use pretty much all of these because I kind of want a really good sturdy one to go on the wall over here. So again, doing it from east to west. Now, this one is actually a little bit too short. See where that bent at? So I'm gonna see, without letting go of my south piece, because I would be very upset with myself if I did that. And it was still moist enough that I could turn it a little bit and redo it. You don't really wanna let it get really different at the bottoms. You're gonna tie it off and have a little bit left over, and you can trim that or otherwise, but especially if you're leaving your wheat on, you really want to try to keep your wheat reasonably oriented to each other, or you're going to be really annoyed with yourself when you go to trim it later. And if you are wondering, that is indeed the voice of experience. All right. Now, one of the interesting things about putting really thin ones on, especially the sort of further along you get, is that they kind of move a little bit more. So you've got to notice that and kind of be aware of how that's happening. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got 5 left, and obviously I can't use 5. So we're just going to add 1 more to each of them. And then I think I'm going to be good, because that's a really nice sturdy cross. I'm going to try to use, for the reasons just enumerated, some of the sturdier ones. So again, holding on to my south, I am just going to move east to west, even as the sun lights up the world as it returns this spring, as Brighid lights our heart and hearth with her fair countenance, as if I may wax poetic for a moment. You all know how much I love my words. So, here we are. This is my next to last one. So, that one's on. Now, for this last one, given it its turn, what I want to do is I want to take this one that I just did, and I just want to push it out a little bit. Do you see how it's sticking out at the bottom? So this is my south, east to west, and there's like this little pocket here. And I want to come, so I am going under and over, just like I always will, but I want to catch these two bits right there in that sort of open pocket and just go through there. And I want to do that because as I do that and I pull this good and tight, right, I can also pull this piece back up nice and tight, and that is going to hold the whole thing together better when I let it go. Now, it's going to be a little loose. I want to make sure to tighten this part up before I tie it off, but I'm going to do that with all the pieces. You can see how it's a little bit looser here. But this means that if I suddenly have an emergency or something of that nature, it's going to stick together. And honestly, if you're in the middle of doing this and like all of a sudden the cat just knocked your favorite like mug over full of tea on your laptop, and there's nobody else to grab it, well, if it's your laptop, all right, drop the thing, you can come back to it. But if you have a little bit less urgency than that, this is how you can pause in the middle of your project and come back to it, is just making that space to slip that in there. And you're gonna need to have at least a few turns here, or it's not gonna be sturdy enough to hold. But once you've done a few, this is a way to set this aside and come back to it when you have a little more space if things happen. And I will tell you, before I learned that particular trick, my efforts at doing this were, I won't say less successful, because certainly they were in fact egregious crosses, but they were less, well, they were more frustrating. So I'm just going to kind of, based on the thickness of this and the size of my lengths, and whether or not I am going to be really interested in like all of the ends being about the same length at the end, pick a kind of a place and just start tying that off. I like to have a little bit sticking out, whether it's sort of that wheat head or not. Just makes me feel better that way. I just broke it. However, I tightened it before I broke it, so all is not lost. And you can always come back and sort of pretty these up later. And so this time, instead of doing it the direction that we were turning, we're going to turn it the opposite way. So we start by tying off the south, and instead of making our west the new south, we are going to make east the new south. So we are going widdershins, and we are doing that because that makes it much easier for us to sort of tighten up some of these places that need a little bit of help with that. This is going to be easier for me to manipulate if it's not fraying, so I'm just going to nip off that end there, and this is nice and tight. And because I'm me, nobody is going to be surprised when I grab my ruler, and that's about 3.5 inches. So yeah, I eyeballed that pretty well. I don't know if eyeballing, I'm pretty sure eyeballing is a verb. And I will say that if it is not a verb, it should be, and that is, I think, the primary criteria for changes in language, at least in the world of Amy, is if it's not, it should be. Well then, so shall it be. Now, this one didn't quite tighten up the way I wanted it to, so I'm just going to give it a little wiggle. I have found in my life that giving things a little wiggle is often exactly what is needed when they're not doing what you want them to. And that particular thing ended up moving up just a little bit, but now it's pretty much perfect. And if not perfect, it is at least good. And I know at least one person watching this video has said to me something along the lines of the perfect and the good and enemyhood and all of those good things. And I have, if not actually taken your lessons to heart, at least heard them. So, again, my east became my south. Got my lovely little piece here. I feel like something out of a romance novel as I say that, because that always seems to be some version of trashy romance novel language about women when they are considered particularly, I don't know, attractive. Something about being a lovely little piece. I am getting really off topic, my apologies. This is a much edited version of the way that my mind works day to day. Notice that I have even managed to avoid the colorful language. You can see, like, I'm just like messing with this and manipulating it all over the place. And it's not breaking on me because it's nice and sturdy. If you have tried to do one of these with the wheat head on, and then you find yourself ready to scream or rip your hair out or rip somebody else's hair out, I highly recommend trying to do it this way. So as you can see, right, so we started here, and then east became south, east became south, and now we are on our final piece that needs tying. And so I'm going to do my last little bit of straightening up for all of my bits and bobs. And then I am going to come down here and tie. And I'm probably going to come back later and do something really cute with the green, because that just feels really good. Just feels like a really good, fun, positive idea. I have seen people use much simpler ways of tying these, by the way. So I have seen people use like those bits of elastic that you use to make jewelry. I've seen people use the little hair ties for braiding when you're doing a lot of small braids. I've seen people use zip ties, ribbon, all kinds of things. But now that we have done our last bits, we have a fully completed Brigid's cross. And I might have already tightened these too much. I'm pretty sure I did. But what I'm thinking you could do if you wanted to add wheat heads is go back in before you tie it, since it's pretty sturdy, and just sort of lay a few sort of inside, so intermixed in, cut to the right length, and add just a few little wheat tassels at the end in that way. And there you have it. These are getting way too dry, so I'm not going to do it now, but I am going to try to do a couple of the variations this year, I think. And if I do have a chance to sit down and do those, I'll make a video of that as well. And I hope that there was something of meaning or engagement, or if nothing else, a bit of humor and lightness in this for you. And much love. May you be well.